Inside America's Boardrooms, the informational show for board members and corporate secretaries. Brought to you with Knowledge Partners, Diligent, PwC, Center for Audit Quality, the Conference Board, and Corporate Board Member. Along with content contributors Equilar, Meridian Compensation Partners, Wilson Sonsini Goodrich and Rosati, Donnelly Financial Solutions, and the Society for Corporate Governance.
Welcome to this edition of Inside America's Boardrooms. I'm TK Kerstetter, the CEO of Boardroom Resources and the co-founder and editor-at-large at Corporate Board Member magazine. We're here once again at the Society for Corporate Governance annual conference here in Washington, D.C., which is a collection of GCs and corporate secretaries that obviously have a big influence on the board of directors. One of the benefits is we get the advantage of some great guests for the show, and today is no exception. It's my pleasure to welcome David Post, who's the Director of Research at the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board. So welcome, David.
Thank you, TK. Good to be here.
I had mentioned to you that I was going to try and do a two-part series. We try and keep this short and sweet. At the same time, we like to get to the point and have good information. But I thought with the first segment of this that we should really get to the point of understanding what the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board is.
Call it SASB for short, a little easier.
And we all know FASB, so this is SASB. Why don't you talk about how the SASB came about, when it was created, and sort of its purpose.
Okay. So we were founded in 2011 with the idea that we would create a set of industry-specific standards in the sustainability space that are financially material and that are decision useful for companies as well as investors, as well as cost effective for companies to implement. Because if we develop a set of standards that are very expensive to implement, then companies aren't going to report them and no one would benefit. Mike Bloomberg was one of our original founders and continues to be one of our big funders and was chairman of our board for the last 4 years. Probably examples are a good way to talk about things. So from a decision useful standpoint, if you think of yourself as a company in the steel industry, and we have a metric in the steel industry, which is the amount of energy consumed per ton of steel that you produce. And only about 20% of the companies in the steel industry actually report something similar to that metric. So our objective would be that if every company in the steel industry reported that, then they would all know how they're performing on a financially material sustainability issue. And if, for example, you happen to be one of the companies that's performing towards the bottom, if you get this information, you find out, you might have thought you were average, but you find out you're at the bottom, there's incentive probably from your board and from other management and maybe from your investors to do a better job and deliver better results. So that's decision useful information for company managements. And it's really decision useful information for investors, because big investors, they like to have data. They like to have information about material information regarding company performance, and that's the kind of information we'd like to provide both to companies and to investors. And then maybe the last thing is that we're about to, just in a couple months, after 7 years in existence, come out with the first complete set of standards for all 77 industries.
Again, help me define this a little further.
Sure.
So, when people hear the word sustainability, that gets married with ESG, and you aren't really creating a grade, okay? But explain again a little further of there are ESG issues,
right?
But explain, if you would, the quantitative part of that, and is there any qualitative part?
Inevitably, investors look for quantitative information. And with our standards, the metrics that we have, about 80% of them are quantitative and about 20% of them are qualitative. So it provides the type of information that investors can utilize to evaluate companies, and also for companies to evaluate themselves versus peers.
And you're talking sustainability issues that affect the bottom line, that are measurable.
Right. So every single topic in our standards, so our typical industry, we have 5 sustainability topics. Like in the steel industry, one of those 5 is energy efficiency. In the drugs and biotech industry, one of those topics is affordability and fair pricing, because those are sustainability issues, but they're also financially material issues. So we have typically 5 of those topics in each industry and 12 or 13 associated metrics. Again, 80% of those metrics are quantitative and about 20% of those are qualitative, so providing decision useful information to investors and companies.
You know, it's not uncommon when we talk about ESG and those issues for the boards to say, how does that my performance get measured, okay?
Right.
You're proposing that from a bottom line perspective, that this is one way that we can start to break down ESG and start to have reasonable measurement tools
right.
to compare company versus
right.
company.
Right, it's a really key component or differentiator for SASB is that we're not measuring anyone. We're not coming out with any ratings or rankings or anything like that. What we do is we consult with companies, so we do our own research, and then we consult with companies and investors to get their agreement and buy-in, and we make changes, and we have an independent standards board, and then we come up with a group of standards in each industry, a really kind of limited, minimal set of standards that companies can voluntarily choose to report on their own. And then companies can measure themselves. We're at the early stages here of reporting in terms of SASB metrics. We had a few companies report recently, well-known companies, Nike, Kellogg, General Motors, PSA, a French auto company in the last month or so. So we're at the very early stages, but it's company-generated information, and we don't rate or rank anyone.
Yeah. So there's no question that institutional investors, that ESG has, in the last 12 months, has just sort of been a groundswell and grown, certainly on that side. But if you look at board members, and any studies that I've seen where they sort of rank, these are the issues that we're worried about, and these are the issues that we want to spend time on, usually sustainability and ESG issues are at the bottom of that. So when you look into the future, how are directors going to be sensitive to this going forward, and what do you think the future is? What would you say to somebody when they say, well, how's all this going to play out?
Right. Well, I think that one of the reasons that directors might see sustainability issues is lower down on their list is because there's such a large number of them. And so if you look at the very large list of sustainability issues that are raised by different stakeholders, different groups, you might say that they shouldn't be that high on the list. But if you try and narrow it down to that set that are financially material, then I think that most board members would say, all right, those kind of make sense. I get why those could be linked to the financial statements of the company. I mean, there was a Harvard Business School study in 2016 and a Russell study that came out in the last couple of months that looked at data from 2 very large sustainability data providers. And they looked at their data, and they looked at the percentage of that data that was deemed likely to be financially material in each industry by SASB. And about 20% of that set of sustainability data was deemed by us to be, or by these third parties, Harvard and Russell, to be financially material, looking at that information through our lens. So only a smaller portion is really financially material, and therefore I think particularly relevant for directors and management to consider.
We'll tackle that, if it's okay with you, in our second segment. I want to thank you again for setting our foundation, and we'll be back with you in just a moment.
Very good to be here.
And that will conclude this edition of Inside America's Boardrooms. We hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be back again next week when we take another look at a critical topic that'll help you be a better board member or committee member. So we'll see you then.
Join us again next week for Inside America's Boardrooms. Brought to you with Knowledge Partners, Diligent, PwC, Center for Audit Quality, the Conference Board, and Corporate Board Member. Along with content contributors Equilar, Meridian Compensation Partners, Wilson Sonsini Goodrich and Rosati, Donnelly Financial Solutions, and the Society for Corporate Governance.